If you want all of your data in one place, you need the Intuit ERP. I'm Damon John, and I run my growing business on Intuit Enterprise Suite. Learn more at intuit.com/ERP.
Hi, and welcome to Kay Let's Talk, the podcast where we break down storytelling across books, television, and film with a special love for book-to-screen adaptations. Here, we talk about craft, character arcs, structure, dialogue, visual language, and the creative choices that shape how a story lands. If you like thoughtful conversational deep dives into the stories you can't stop thinking about, you're in the right place. Let's talk. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I am very excited for this week's episode because we are talking about the music from episode 5 of Heated Rivalry. This episode has so much to offer inside of it. There's a lot of score in this episode, but also plenty of really important soundtrack moments as well. And we're continuing on with the themes of the previous episodes, but also expanding upon them in really meaningful ways because episodes 5 and 6 are very different from episodes 1 and 2 in regards to how Shane and Ilya's story is being portrayed, and the music reflects that. So once again, this is part of a 6-part mini-series where we're breaking down all of the music episode by episode in Heated Rivalry and discussing in depth how Jacob Tierney's decision-making and intentionality behind each of these music choices shapes the episode in ways that might not be obvious upon first watch. So without further ado, let's get into the music of episode 5. So the first song we hear is actually a repeated song, which is Rivalry by Peter. And this is playing when Shane is reading tweets about him and Rose. And the first time we hear this song is actually the very beginning of episode 1. So there's an important parallel to be drawn there. It's the first song that we hear in the show. So to represent Shane looking at what people are saying online about him and Rose in this way is, I think, very impactful because we are also getting a splice between him and Ilya, and it does feel like tensions are high between the two of them again, which is something that the first episode tried to establish early on, is that there's tension between Shane and Ilya, and to the outside world, it is a rivalry, but inside their bubble, it's unrequited feelings and difficulty expressing their emotions. And so that's happening again here in this moment. When we cut to Ilya doing the exact same thing, scrolling on his phone, looking at these tweets, he's in the airport and he's about to board the plane. And the song sort of spins out right at the moment when we switch perspectives and we're looking at Ilya's phone in his hand, scrolling through the exact same timeline that we saw Shane looking at in the first portion of this song. The rivalry song continues to play while we hear the Man on the Crease podcast continue. They're talking about the upcoming All-Star game in Tampa Bay. And for the first time, Shane and Ilya will be on the same team together. So again, that rivalry theme is obviously prevalent here. And we see Shane listening to the podcast while he's on his rowing machine. And we get this really amazing camera work, which is meant to drop us into his emotions and nerves about the upcoming All-Star weekend and seeing Ilya again, especially following on the heels of his relationship announcement with Rose. But we also transition into a reintroduction of Scott Hunter. So the key players of the episode are established very quickly through this song. And it's the same running scene that we see at the beginning of episode 3 with Scott Hunter, which then fades out with the music and into the title card where we end the song Rivalry and cut into the new songs that are playing when Shane walks into this restaurant to meet Rose for dinner. So the song that's playing in the restaurant when Shane meets Rose there is a song called Ilya by an artist called Malco. It came out in 2024, and he is a French urban pop singer from Canada. The song itself, we only get a very short clip of it. Most of what we hear is the backbeat of the song, but it's talking about a woman that this man is interested in and how attractive she is. And the lyrics are really not prevalent when we're listening to it as Shane walks in. It's more so meant to establish the vibe of the restaurant itself. And again, if you're paying close enough attention, this is the same restaurant that Shane met JJ at and met Rose for the first time in. So even though it's probably due to set constraints and wanting to make the most of the set location that they had secured for this restaurant, they are meeting in the exact same restaurant that they met in episode 4. Once Shane and Rose start to talk, we do have a splice in the scene to kind of move us forward in the night through the timeline. And the next song we hear is called Solutions to My Gloom by Unessential Oils. And this song came out in 2024 by this alternative indie band from Montreal. And we hear it playing in the background while Shane and Rose are talking, and it's meant to be atmospheric. So this is the song that would be playing in the actual restaurant, and Shane and Rose could hear it themselves. The lyrics are then pushed way to the back of the audio. So mostly we hear the drum and guitar taken from this song, but the lyrics themselves are actually a very interesting window into what this scene turns into, because a lot of the lyrics, I think, are very much meant to represent Shane's internal thoughts and struggles throughout this conversation. The lyric that stood out to me was, I like it here in the waiting room, a sense of impending doom, which is pretty indicative of what's happening for Shane when Rose starts leading him down this line of questioning, and ultimately Shane has to confront a truth that he has been actively ignoring within himself for years now. But the lyrics are interesting. It says, after 15 minutes, I feel fine, but I think I'll stay and be alone because it's much more fun. To watch the women taking off their jackets, oh, then bear the thought of going home. In fact, I like it here in the waiting room, a sense of impending doom. Scroll and creep through the punctured skin, solutions to my gloom. Oh, after 15 minutes, I feel fine, but I think I'll stay and be alone because it's much more fun. Solutions to my gloom, stories, those are sad but true. So the song ends right when Rose says, I have a feeling, and maybe I'm completely off base here, but I don't know. I feel like you'd rather be kissing Miles. And that's when the music stops, and it takes place right when the confrontation finally happens. And that's when we switch into a different, really, really beautiful song that is in French. So again, if you are an English-speaking viewer and you do not understand French, this song, there's no lyrics playing in the show version of the song, but if you look up the lyrics to the song, they're really, really beautiful. The song is called Cherishing the Beauty by an artist called Jessica Charlie. And of course, the original song, the name is in French. The song came out in 2020, and this musician is from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And the song starts with a very simple piano chord. Then we hear the strumming of a guitar, and the overall sound is almost innocent at first. And interestingly, like I mentioned before, this song is entirely instrumental, and it's not playing in the restaurant, but instead serving as the backdrop to our listening experience as viewers. And so the lack of lyrics means that we focus on Shane's reactions to what's being said and what he's thinking about. And so we're clued into what he's thinking about through these really beautifully placed flashback moments that we see on screen. But ironically, the lyrics to this song actually fit perfectly into the scene too. So if we weren't aware of the lyrics, this melody does a really good job of putting us into Shane's headspace and into the moment specifically. But even with the lyrics absent, it's meant to represent Shane's internal journey to self-acceptance and being able to identify that his heart is beating very strongly for this one person, and this part of himself that was lying dormant was awakened within him once he met Ilya and realized that he's in love with Ilya. And so the lesson of this song, and we'll go through the lyrics, is that he has to surrender himself to that and let it happen because he's been resisting it for so long. And this song is meant to be almost a catharsis for him, where he's finally able to, through this conversation with Rose, admit it to himself, but also to another person. And that first step for Shane is monumental. So the lyrics themselves for this song are really, like I said, beautiful, and I translated them, so they might not be perfect, but it says, when the heart dares to beat strong, it awakens the human lying dormant within. If people walked the streets, lifted their heads, and dared to say hello, there is nothing else to do but open my eyes to life, to death, to love. When we sculpt the clouds with our gaze, it awakens the adult who is too sensible. If grown-ups truly listened, children would naturally do the same. There is nothing else to do but open my eyes, give the very best, to life, to death, to love, to life, to death, to love. If we all ventured together down new paths, perhaps tomorrow could see a different day. Reinventing without looking back, simply cherishing the beauty of life, of death, of love, to life, to death, to love. So again, just a really beautiful song inserted there. The next song that we hear is called Text Me Whenever by Peter, and this plays after Shane and Rose agree to be friends. So this song doesn't actually start until Rose says the words, text me whatever, and it's a very quiet, almost like a humming noise that starts playing in the backdrop of this scene, and then there's this insertion of a pulsing sound that goes over it. But it's a very optimistic set of notes playing. So anytime we have that pulsing beat that Peter uses, I often associate that with the heartbeat of the character that's in the scene, or it's meant to express kind of the overall anxiety level of the person. So I think Shane here, we can see in his body language that he's just admitted something huge and now it's out in the world, and he's still carrying himself as though he's not sure what to do with these bottled up emotions yet, but there's been an outlet of some sort for him through Rose, and he sees that the sky didn't fall after this conversation. And so the optimism of this song, I think, is really appropriate here. And that quickly fades into and drops us into the scene with Ilya and Svetlana. And it does that by slowly removing all of the instruments that were added when we were watching Shane and Rose. They get pulled back and the volume lowers at the same time that each of those instruments are removed until the volume completely fades out and we are fully immersed into the scene between Ilya and Svetlana in Boston, where they're talking about the upcoming All-Star game. The next song that we hear is Trembling by Peter, and this is playing when Shane walks into the bar in Tampa. And the actual song on the score, the soundtrack, is almost 5 minutes long. We don't hear the full song in the show in its entirety, interestingly, but it's reused a number of times in this episode. So I'll point out all those different moments as we go along. But we fade into the song after Svetlana brings up Rose Landry and Shane and Ilya being on the same team for the All-Star weekend. And that same elongated synthy note that we have heard before from Peter, it's often used to identify Ilya's feelings of unease, and it's used in that way again here. And we get this uptight shot of his face where we can see that he's not happy thinking about Rose Landry showing up at All-Star Weekend with Shane. And that's when we cut to the promo shot for the Tampa All-Star Weekend. And the song turns into a much more boppy techno beat, which is appropriate for the location of Tampa itself. But also the version in the show is cut a little differently. So we get to the high point of the intro a little quicker in the show, and it happens as soon as Ilya's eyes lock on Shane, that the music cuts for a moment, almost like his heart stops for a minute, and then it picks right back up when Shane enters the bar and Ilya has to collect himself in order to see him again after how much time has passed since the tuna melt scene. The trembling in the title here is definitely meant to represent Ilya sitting there at the bar right now, because we see him fidgeting, and throughout the show we've learned that he touches his ears or rubs his fingers against things or himself when he is anxious or nervous about something. And there's this interesting sound that plays over the background when Shane is walking towards him that I thought almost sounded like a plane landing or attempting to land, lowering in altitude. So I thought that was kind of interesting that as Shane's walking towards Ilya, it's like he's a plane landing beside Ilya at this bar. And right when Shane sits down, the music fades from the foreground, which means it's playing for us as viewers to identify the mood for Ilya. It shifts and it starts playing over the speakers in the bar itself, so the characters can hear it. And a lot of the timing and the drops and the tempo changes in the song line up perfectly with the scene itself. So again, the original song is 5 minutes long. It was definitely cut and spliced in order to fit what footage they had, which I think is really important because it lines up so well. So we get this one moment when Ilya asks Shane if he brought anyone with him. And when Ilya and Shane start to openly look at each other with this longing look in their eyes, and Ilya says he likes to get into the spirit with his shirt, all of those moments line up with those drops or tempo changes in the song. And it's not until Carter Vaughn approaches that the song switches away from Trembling by Peter and turns into a song called Boys Will Be Girls by an artist called Keir, which came out in 2021. And this is a British singer-songwriter who's known for contemporary pop and using a lot of rock influences. So as soon as Carter interrupts Shane and Ilya, this song starts playing inside the bar. So again, the characters can hear this song in the background too. And it starts from the top of the song. So it's definitely meant to show us that the song Trembling is not necessarily happening solely for atmosphere. That song is meant to heighten the emotions that are being shown on screen. And then this song replaces that once that moment is broken by Carter Vaughn. So again, we get a standard soundtrack song once the moment's broken, but we get the soundtrack song, which helps tell us how to feel when we have a more intimate moment between Shane and Ilya. For this song in particular, Boys Will Be Girls, the artist's intention was mainly to relay his own ambition about what it means to be yourself, regardless of what that might look like to people and their expectations of you. And the song is definitely meant to talk about themes of what it means to be masculine or what it means to be feminine, especially in regards to loving and accepting yourself, which again is a very central theme of this show. And the song plays over the discussion as it shifts to Shane hiring a stylist, and Ilya and Shane start to flirt a little bit more, and that's when Ilya brings up Rose Landry again, and Shane admits that he wanted to look better and that he and Rose aren't dating anymore because they're not compatible. So right when Shane says that, we cut to a different song by Peter Peter again, which again is used to relay the intimacy of the moment. But the lyrics of this song, I think, are really fun and appropriate, and it's a fun song to insert in this setting as well. It says, I met a girl, it seemed like she was from another land. She had a voice that was so quiet it could cut through sand, taking me down. We walked around the city until it was getting dark. I kept on dreaming about the people who have come and gone. Where did they go? Kids don't lie. There's nothing on the radio. Jesus saves us all now at the end of the world, and boys will be girls. The drugs are cursed because everybody I know hurts. Peace on earth whenever you can get it because boys will be girls. I met a boy who didn't know he was so beautiful. He doesn't know it yet, but someday he could have it all. Look at him go. He walked around the city until it was getting dark. He kept on dreaming about people who have come and gone. And that verse 2, I think, is very representative of both Shane and Ilya and how they feel about each other, how they are beautiful to one another. Then the chorus repeats, the kids don't lie, there's nothing on the radio. Jesus saves us all now at the end of the world, and boys will be girls. The drugs are cursed because everybody I know hurts. Peace on earth wherever you can get it, because boys will be girls. And then the bridge says, I never said that it wouldn't hurt to be alone in a lonesome world. I never said that it wouldn't hurt to be alone in a lonesome world. They're calling out for innocence again. And then the chorus repeats. And that is when we shift into the song Hollanov by Peter Peter, which is the overarching song used in the All-Star Game montage. And this song is 2.5 minutes long. It starts right when Shane admits that he and Rose are not compatible, and we see Ilya holding eye contact with him, and we can feel that electricity between them again because he knows Shane is no longer with Rose. And when Shane can tell that Ilya is receptive to that, that's when he gets up and forces himself to walk around the bar to give himself some space from the intensity of it. But the fact that the song carries over from the speakers in the bar, and then once we break the scene and move into the pool scene, the song is switched to being overlaid on top of the scene. So again, this song is meant for only us as viewers because the characters can no longer hear it, and it represents us watching in real time as these two people framed as rivals are moving through life hyper aware that this is their person. It's the same techno beats we get in a lot of the hockey scenes, but it's, again, very uplifting and the notes are very bright here. And the volume actually grows the loudest when Ilya asks the kids if they know Shane, and they say that's Shane Hollander. And that's when we splice to the scenes of them skating during the All-Star Game together, and we can truly see them in sync for the first time on the ice. And it's so magical and that's what they're trying to capture. So the volume lowers back down whenever we're back at the pool and we're meant to hear Ilya's commentary, but it picks right back up every time we're on the ice with them because they're capturing a flow state on the ice with them together. And I think the song is meant to imply that in that flow state, they're both so happy. And it's incredible how they both can feel that when they play beside one another. But it also means in a large and small scale for both of them that they can have this flow state and this feeling of being in sync with one another outside of just the bedroom, because we've only ever seen them experience that when they meet up for these hookups. And when Shane is watching the kids in the pool with Ilya, in the book, he thinks to himself that Ilya would be a good dad. So all of this is a really big shift in their emotional journey. And this song and the title of the song is meant to show how there is this magic that happens when they come together outside of the bedroom too. And it fades beautifully into the scene on the beach where they're able to be quiet with one another for once. And Shane invites himself basically into Ilya's room so that they can spearhead this conversation and move their relationship forward. The next song that we hear is Heartbeat 4 by Peter, and this is what plays when Shane apologizes for freaking out and they meet up in Boston. So it's one of my favorite songs in the whole score because in a minute and 38 seconds, it feels like my soul's been healed. And when we get Shane and Ilya hugging on the hotel bed, that's when the song starts, and that fades into when Shane is leaving Ilya's room after they have had sex, and us as viewers do not get to see it, which is a big change and shift from how their relationship has been portrayed in the show so far. And that's meant to be really significant for us, that we are removed from that intimacy. We do not get to see it. We get to see the intimacy afterwards. And this is a big moment for them. The song is meant to reflect this monumental step that they've taken in their relationship and in admitting their feelings for one another. And it also carries over and is meant to show us that that feeling is prolonged because a week later they meet at Ilya's house. And there's this little bit of off-key notes that start to play over the more calming kind of core makeup of the song when they're texting one another until Shane leaves the hotel room and we cut to them in Ilya's bed. So again, we're not viewing the intimate moment. We're focusing on the changes in how they communicate and how they are with one another outside of the sex itself. And this song is a really, really great way to show us how that flows and how time is passing, but the feelings that they're feeling and these major changes that they're making in their behavior and how they're approaching the relationship has been maintained. The next song that we hear is a song called Oh My Bride by the Deadly Snakes. And this happens when Ilya announces the $1,000 award in the locker room. And this is a song that came out in 2003. It's very much like a roll call sound. It's meant to be uplifting and funny and energetic, and it sort of lulls us into this false sense of security before Ilya answers his phone, and all of the momentum is sucked out of the scene, and we cut to black. And we only hear the first few lines of lyrics in this song, and it's very much the repetitive "Oh My Bride" lyric over and over, but the main aspect is the up-tempo beat of the music and not so much the lyrics. When we see Shane worried about Ilya because he hasn't heard from him, this is when we get the opening notes from the song Trembling by Peter again. This is meant to mirror that Shane is trembling about Ilya too, and the song never fully develops into itself. It stays very breathy and airy until we see Shane reading in bed and Ilya calls him back from Moscow and they talk to each other on the phone for the first time. So this is another area where the song Trembling is repurposed. The next song we hear is when Ilya is at his father's funeral in Moscow, and it is called My Sinful Soul. It is a Russian Orthodox chant, and it's very atmospheric. The lyrics are, "My sinful soul, why don't you weep? You shall weep, O soul, and lament always, and therein shall you find consolation. For you won't be able to weep when the death comes, and after death your sins will condemn you. Cast away your sinful attire in repentance. For if you won't cast your sins away, you surely won't escape the hell. The sufferers wear crowns on their heads, and they sing the song of archangels. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah." So this song plays over the scene when we see Ilya at the table, and he looks across the table at his brother. We see his father's medals on the table, and his father was not a good person. So I think that this being the song that's playing over it is very much meant to convey that, and also put us in the headspace of being in that sort of Russian Orthodox approach to a funeral, and seeing how they have all these traditions that we get little glimpses of with the cinematography that are happening around him. But it's also a very somber song, and we know that the scene that follows this is also very somber. So when Ilya and Alexei fight, the song is called In the Dugout, which came out in 1942, and it's a famous Soviet World War II song, which was created by a poet named Alexei Surkov and a composer, Listov, and it's meant to capture this very deep longing and feeling of home that the soldiers would have felt while they were fighting and freezing to death on the front lines. And the poem was written as this sort of personal notebook entry after Surkov survived enemy fire on the front line. It's very melancholic, so the song is meant to capture that as well. And the lyrics are, "The fire is flickering in the narrow stove, resin oozes from the log like a tear, and the concertina in the bunker sings to me of your smile and your eyes. The bushes whispered to me about you in a snow-white field near Moscow. I want you above all to hear how sad my living voice is. You are now very far away. Expanses of snow lie between us. It is so hard for me to come to you, and here there are 4 steps to death. Sing concertina in defiance of the snowstorm. Call out to that happiness which has lost his way. I'm warm in the cold bunker because of your inextinguishable love." The next song that we hear when Svetlana comforts Ilya is a song called Cranes by Jan Frankel, which came out in 1969. And again, it's another famous Soviet-Russian song about soldiers who didn't come back from battles. And it's a translation of a poem which is talking about cranes as a symbol of fallen soldiers based off of this story out of Hiroshima. There's a girl who contracted leukemia as a result of the radioactive contamination after the bombings, and she constructed 1,000 origami cranes, hoping that it might save her life from the sickness. And so in memory of the paper cranes folded by the girl, it's meant to showcase innocent victims of war. And so the famous lines are, "I sometimes feel that the soldiers who have not returned from the bloody fields never lay down to earth, but turned into white cranes." This was turned into a song in 1969. It's one of the best-known Russian-language World War II ballads. And the lyrics are, "Sometimes I feel that all of those fallen soldiers who never left the bloody battle zones have not been buried to decay and molder, but turned into white cranes that softly groan. And thus, until these days since those bygone times, they still fly in the skies and gently cry. Isn't it why we often hear those bells chime and calmly freeze while looking in the sky? A tired flock of cranes still flies, their wings flap, birds glide into the twilight, roaming free. In their formation, I can see a small gap. It might be so that space is meant for me. The day shall come when in a mist of ashen I'll soar with cranes, and final rest I'll find. From the skies calling in a bird-like fashion, all those of you who all have left behind." Ilya is very much someone who represents collateral in a internal war within his family life, but also the war he has inside of himself, and also the very complicated social structures of the country that he's from. And so I think this being a song that on the surface sounds like it might be comforting, but also knowing the actual subject matter, it's a very interesting juxtaposition that I think works really beautifully there.
This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs.
The next song that we hear, of course, is Moonlight Sonata, or Piano Sonata number 14 in C minor by Beethoven, which came out in 1802. And this plays during the Russian monologue scene. This song obviously is known throughout the world as the Moonlight Sonata, but again, that wasn't the original title. It was Beethoven's most famous compositions on the piano, and he wrote it around the age of 30. A lot of people have come up with a lot of lore for where the Moonlight Sonata name comes from. Jacob has said that he will be using a lot of Beethoven in season 2, which I think is really telling, because this is a song that as soon as you hear the opening notes, you know what it is, it's recognizable, and it pulls you into whatever memory you might have attached to this song. And it's something that it does feel like it's a dark song at times. It does feel like it's an uplifting song at times. It brings you on a journey, and so does Ilya's monologue. So it's perfectly placed in this scene in particular, in my opinion. And I also think that the Moonlight Sonata name is appropriate, given that this conversation is taking place at nighttime in Russia, where we see Ilya in this tunnel. And like the book describes, Shane can't understand what Ilya is saying to him, but he thinks to himself in the novel that it's almost like music washing over him, because Ilya's voice is so beautiful when he's speaking in his native tongue, and he's free to enunciate things and say things in a way that comes more natural to him than English does. And so having this song choice in this moment be an orchestral song and having the volume of it wash over us, just like it's washing over Shane, and having us unconsciously draw that parallel to Ilya's voice being very much like a melody or an orchestra playing over the scene is really beautiful. And I think that this scene is so impactful, but the music in particular here adds so much to the tone that, as beautiful as it is to listen to Connor Story speak Russian, having the background be this iconic sonata really hammers home the journey that Ilya is going on, as well as he admits these things to Shane, knowing full well that he can't understand them, but feeling the weight of them lift off of him all the same. After the Russian monologue, we get the first notes of the song One Soul, which is played in its entirety in episode 6. So this is, again, a little glimpse into what it sounds like when the two of them finally become one soul together and grow closer to admitting that they love one another. It's fitting that it comes on the heels of Ilya having admitted that he loves Shane, albeit in Russian, and Shane cannot understand it. But on a soul level, they both know they are in love with one another at this point. And in the lead up to the game between Shane and Ilya, we get this generic pump-up song that's playing over the broadcast and in the arena during warm-ups when Shane and Ilya are talking at center ice, and he gives him the door code, and him and Hayden talk along the boards. So it's just a very typical guitar-heavy song that gets sucked out of the rink and replaced by Heartbeat 3, which played during the tuna melt scene in episode 4, once the two of them are at the face-off dot. So initially the notes feel like they could be part of the Heartbeat series because both Shane and Ilya are so happy when we see them facing off one another on the ice, and we see Shane smiling, but then we're hit with the impact of the song cutting out just as Shane is hit on the ice, and that's when the song is replaced by Flatline by Peter Peter when Shane gets hurt. This song starts playing during the broadcast where we see Ilya on the TV looking down at Shane, who's on the ice and waiting for the medics who are placing him on a gurney and taking him off the ice. And we switch back and forth between being on the ice with Shane and also being on the TV coverage. And the song plays over both, so it's very much atmospheric for the viewer. And we can hear Ilya asking if Shane's okay, but then it's spliced with snippets from the broadcast coverage. And then we hear Shane talking to the medics before the doors of the ambulance shut on him. And that's when we're moved into the hospital scene and the Flatline song is removed from the screen. The next song that we hear is a song called Bonnie by Absolute Treat, which came out in 2021. They are a Toronto-based pop band, and this song is playing in the background of Rose's trailer when she is talking to Shane on the phone. The lyrics are pretty simple. It says, Bonnie, you're a work of art. Bonnie, you're a wild card. Bonnie, you're a dreamboat. Into my heart, into my heart. Bonnie, I'm trying to forget, but you keep coming back. Bonnie, and when I'm lying to myself, you keep coming back into my arms, into my arms. The next song that we hear, which is playing in the background of Shane's parents' cottage, is Bach Prelude and Fugue in C minor. And this moment, it's really only the fugue and not the prelude of the song that we hear, but I loved the detail that this is what Shane's parents would be listening to at night in their house once they dim the lights and get ready for bed, and they're unwinding with one another. And I thought it was really calming and gives a window into what Shane's life would be like with his parents and what his upbringing must have been like to live in a house where the way that they unwind at the end of the day is with beautiful classical music playing in the background over the speakers in the home. It's also very different than other times when Shane and Ilya have been texting, and sometimes we get music that implies that there's nerves going on between them as they talk, and Shane has been hesitant in what he actually says back, but you can see here with the text bubbles on the screen that that's gone. Shane doesn't overthink what he's going to say to Ilya anymore. He just says what's on his mind, and Ilya's receptive to it. And the two of them are able to have more normal conversations that have nothing to do with meeting to hook up with one another anymore. The next song that we hear is Everybody's Glory by Peter, and this is the song that comes on when Scott wins the cup. And it starts to play once the crowd in the rink starts to count down to Scott's MLH Cup victory. And it's a very short song, but it's meant to tie us back to the score used in episode 3 that depicts Scott and Kip's relationship, but also highlight this juxtaposition between Scott, who's at the height of his career, and winning this cup that he has spent his whole life chasing, and still feeling like he's missing out on truly being happy in that moment because Kip is not experiencing it alongside him. When Carter Vaughn takes the cup and Scott looks towards Kip in the stands, this is when the notes of I'll Believe in Anything start again. And because we were tipped off to this song in episode 3, we know that something important is about to happen again. And this iconic scene at the end of episode 5 where I'll Believe in Anything starts playing is really beautiful because it's adjusted multiple times to be full volume on the shots that are on the ice with Scott, and then lowered in the scenes where Shane and Ilya are meant to be listening to the commentators that are kind of ad-libbing what we're seeing play out in front of us. But the drum kick of this song is almost like a march, leading Kip to Scott, but also leading Shane and Ilya to finally giving in to what they want and agreeing to spend 2 weeks together at the cottage. And so it has this very optimistic guitar and this exciting buildup of momentum as we watch the scene unfold through Kip and Scott, and Kip making his way down from the stands to meet Scott. And when the lyrics start to pick up speed, it's almost like they run away from it themselves until the bridge opens up and we hear the guitar and the drums all open up. And that's when Scott and Kip kiss. And it's just this beautiful, beautiful moment where you're just washed with the sounds of the song and how beautifully it's shot. We're spinning around them just like it would feel, like dizzying almost, like the characters feel. And when the drums start to pick up to max speed again, it's right when Ilya gets up out of his chair and calls Shane, and we get this really amazing moment where the audio cuts out completely to mirror Shane being stunned into silence by Ilya saying, I'm coming to the cottage, before the screen goes black and the song picks back up again to play over the end credits. So it just leaves us in this like lull where we're just as stunned as Shane and Ilya are that they just watched this happen on TV, and that Ilya immediately calls Shane and says, I'm coming to the cottage. And Shane has to grapple with that, and he is stunned into silence just like the viewers are. And I remember screaming at my TV when I watched this. I thought this scene was so incredible and iconic, and the song is perfectly placed here for that moment as well. So that's all the music in episode 5. What a doozy, huh? I think all of these songs were so well placed and beautifully paced, and we got a good mix of orchestral songs and rock songs and alternative songs and more building upon Peter Peter's score. And then obviously the I'll Believe in Anything song became such a really prominent way of sharing this show once it was in that kind of height of promo. Everyone was playing this song. It was playing in hockey rinks all over the world. I went to multiple games where this song was playing in between whistles. It was just so cool to see this cultural moment unfold and have a song be tied to it in that way, similar to how the end of episode 4 has All the Things She Said. I think that music is really powerful in that way, and it ties us to a memory very vividly. And so to give this song its revival in a way is really cool as well. If you haven't listened to my episode 3 breakdown, I do talk more about the song I'll Believe in Anything and what it means and what the original lyrics are meant to represent, but feel free to go back and listen to that episode if you are curious. And yeah, I think this one was one of my favorites for music. And then next week, we're going to be talking about episode 6, which has the least amount of music in the show, but very much intentional choices for that episode in particular. And I also think we're going to talk about a lot of the atmospheric sounds that are used in that episode to make up for the lack of music that we hear. So I'm excited to talk about that one next week. As always, thank you so much for listening. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate you being here. And if you have any questions you want to submit for a future Q&A, please be sure to send me those in a DM on Instagram or on TikTok. And I will talk to you all in our next chat.